Hi, everyone, and welcome to session 4B of the DLCD's Farm and Forest Modernization Program Rulemaking on Farm Stands. We have a lot of people who are trying to join this meeting, but this is really the continuation of your last meeting. So we've approached the agenda by saying we're picking up where we left off last time, and last time we ended with public comment. This time we're going to start with the topics that we need to address. So we have a couple of things to address just at the very beginning here as we get people in. And I think we should just wait a minute more for a couple more RAC members. It looks like we've got a good group here right now. But I know there are a couple more people who we are expecting to be here who I don't see yet. So I've got Brandon for Austin. And there's Samantha, good. And we've got Emily and Inga and Jim and Lauren, Lindsay Ing and Mitre. And who else? Peter, I know Peter is here. Samantha's here. Sid is here. Good. Who did I miss while I was doing that? There's Ryan. And there's Peter. Good. Okay. There's Mike. Good. All right. And we've heard, well, let's see, Alice is going to be here, but isn't here yet. Is that right?
Alice did indicate that she's going to be available until 3 o'clock today.
Okay. And Charles. Did I miss? There's Charles. Sorry. There's Charles. Good. Welcome. Justin or Lauren? Not yet. Who just popped in there or turned their camera off? Okay, so I've got Justin, Lauren, Mark, and Matthew. I got Barbara, Commissioner Boyer at the governor's office, got DLCD. Okay. All right. I think we should be good enough to go for now, right? So welcome everyone. This is session 4B. Last time we had session 4A. This is session 4B. And our plan is to pick up where we left off last time on the topics that we're talking about. And we're going to do the welcome. I'm doing the welcome right now. We're going to do introductions in just a second. And I just want to note for everyone who might be watching this on the YouTube as well, that this is a work session of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee that was put together on behalf of the Land Conservation and Development Commission to attend to the charge that you all are going to be reminded of again shortly. This rulemaking, we did allow for some public comment. It is not usual to have public comment in the midst of rulemaking, and for today, we're not having it today because we had it last time, and we need to address the topics that we didn't have time for last time. I do want to just remind everybody, I know if you can go to the next slide, Hillary. I do want to remind everybody, I know I've done this at the start of every meeting, just a reminder of the operating agreement. And I know this turns out to be a topic that you all know well. It means a lot to a lot of people. Everybody that's on this screen right now, this is an important topic for everyone. And I want to underscore that this is very important. And so we put together these operating agreements, and there were two that I just want to bring to the surface right now. And so if you can, yes, thank you for getting those there for me. There are actually three, right? There's one about no surprises, that everybody agreed at the start that you wouldn't do things in a way that would surprise people. The press and the public, we asked that people refer inquiries to the department if possible. We didn't clarify on their social media, and we've learned that that might be something to do next time. And then as appropriate, we really wanted you to just not to discuss rec stuff offline, that we really wanted to be able to have a conversation here while concepts were being looked at so that no one got confused about concepts as rules, because we're not there yet. We're not even close to rules being written at this point. So we're still in that concept phase. I just want to remind everybody of those agreements. I think that's the most that I can do, is to remind you and beg of you, because we're going to be doing some work together for a little while, and I think you're going to hear more about that today. Um, I want to say that. I also want to thank you for being here, for being good members of this, for providing thoughtful comments to the staff as RAC members. There have been some really wonderful ideas being put forward, and staff, from what I can tell, are chewing on them. And I gather some of you don't trust that, and I'm sorry for that. I hope that you do trust that, because I think staff have turned up here really well in these meetings and tried to bring to you ideas of what it looks like from the ideas I got from you all, of what that might look like if it were in rule language. So I just wanted to say that. So please attend today, listening with respect to what everyone else has to say. If you have ideas you want to add them. I am not going to be using the chat today. It was just too much last time, to as many things that were flying around last time. I want to be able to attend to you all, be able to see your faces, see what's going on for each of you during this conversation, and not be looking at text. So Casaria, the rule coordinator, will be fielding those. So if there is something, but really, I want to urge you not even to do that. Let's just keep the discussion here in the room, if you will, and not have the chat function going well, so that everybody's paying attention. Because when you're writing a chat to me, then you are losing attention on what someone else is saying. And I want you just to be listening and engaging in conversation, rather than looking for the next thing that you want to fight against, right? Let's try and build on ideas where we can. This is a tough conversation. It was a conversation the legislature asked for, asked that a group get together and talk about things. And so that's why we're here. So let's try and do everything we can to support each other during these conversations. And I know there have been some pretty pointed personal comments made. And we can't back that up, unfortunately. All I can ask is that moving forward, you can do what you can do personally to keep it respectful, and approach this as with the curiosity and the desire to try and solve this problem together. The problem will be solved somehow. It can be with your help, or it might be other ways. So I can't foretell the future. This is your best choice to have maximum positive influence on the direction of all of this. So I think there have been some things that we found out along the way since we all were together late last week. Thank you all for being willing and flexible to be here today. I'm going to stop talking now and let you introduce yourselves, and then we're going to move along on the agenda. Okay. So my name, for those, if I didn't say, my name is Donna Silverberg. I'm a facilitator with DS Consulting. I have worked with a number of state, federal, and tribal agencies and governments on issues like this, different rulemakings and other plans. And I'm happy to be here with all of you. So I will pass this over. I'll start at the top line on my screen. So Hillary, you're top, and then I'll go to Kirsten and then Anka.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Hillary Foote, and I am the Farm and Forest Land Use Specialist for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Hillary. Kirsten.
Hi, Donna. Should I go ahead and just say a few words? Or are we just doing introductions?
I see Anka nodding her head yes. So all right, go ahead and do that. You all know each other, and so we can wait for the introductions. Yeah, thanks.
Great. So good afternoon, everybody. As Donna said, thank you for coming back. This is a super important topic. There's a clear consensus. There always has been on the importance of farm stands. There's been a lot of kind of information out there, some true, some a little misleading, and some of that I think is a nomenclature issue we've found in talking to a couple of farmers who've called and have been, returning their calls. What Donna said is really important. Keeping the conversation at this table. You all were applied and were appointed to represent interests please do that here. We have limited staff capacity to be running a full-blown public process right now. That's not how this was scoped. So please do keep the conversation here. And it's still very early, as Donna said, with these concepts. We'll probably need to take a bit of a pause to regroup because there has been so much going on outside. It's become something other than a rulemaking advisory committee process. So I'll touch on that at the end when we talk about next steps. The nomenclature issue that we've discovered is that some counties regulate agritourism through farm stand permits. So that can be confusing. When we're talking about farm stands, we think we're talking about not agritourism permits that allow different events. So I want to just provide that clarity and say there's a lot to unpack here. We just appreciate RAC members being here, focused on these 3 additional issues today in the rules advisory, the fiscal impact statement, the housing impact statement, so that we can move forward together. So again, thank you. I'm the deputy director at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I think I failed to say that. Thanks, Donna.
Hi, I think it's my turn now. My name is Anka Matika. I have the privilege of serving as a member of Governor Kochek's office and support the natural resources and climate team, both on policy and communications and public affairs needs. And I wanted to share a few words from our office about this rulemaking, particularly because there have been some very, I think, understandable and real anxieties and fears that we've seen around the potential implications of this rulemaking. They're growing very quickly amongst constituencies, and we're seeing it a lot on social media, and it's coming to our office, to DLCD. We're hearing it, and I want to be really upfront about that. And acknowledge that this is definitely not an easy time to be a farmer. A lot of Oregonians are just barely getting by. And Governor Kotek, I mean, she has been clear since taking office on her belief that our agricultural community is invaluable to Oregon. Not only do the family-owned farms feed us, but they move our economy forward. And that we can do both. We can support locally grown Oregon-born businesses and our farmers, and also preserve our land use planning system and make sure that we hold both of those things true. I just want to also say that I think we need to acknowledge that some of our family-owned small and mid-sized farms may need to consider new financial models to continue to deliver the produce we all value in Oregon. And that, like, fundamentally, those don't have to be at odds with our values. We can do both. And just really want to share appreciation for you all engaging in what is a very difficult conversation, because it's personal, and that's not an easy thing to navigate. And so know that we are here, and we fully believe that dialogue is critical to being able to make this into a successful process. So looking forward to hearing more from DLCD on that pause and a little bit of an extension to ensure that we are doing right by the folks in our community. So that's just a little bit from our office. Super.
Great. Thank you both for those opening comments. And now for the rest of you, I'm just going to ask you to say who you are and who you're representing. So Inga, you're next. Inga, then Lindsay Ing.
Hi, Inga Williams, the Union County Planning Director.
Great, thank you. Lindsay Ing, then Sid Friedman.
Lindsay Ing, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Great.
Sid Friedman, Yamhill County farmer, representing Friends of Yamhill County.
Great, thanks, Sid. Charles, and then Mike McCarthy.
Charles Bennett, Jackson County Planning.
Thank you.
Mike McCarthy, first generation farmer representing Ag for Oregon.
Great, thank you. We've got Sam and then Peter. Oh, you're muted, Samantha. Sorry.
You guys think I would have that figured out by now? Samantha Baird, General Counsel with the Oregon Property Owners Association, representing private property owners, farmers, and those engaged in agritourism.
Thank you.
Peter Carnegie, farmer, Benton County, with a small farm stand.
Great, thanks. Alice, then Gordon.
Alice Morrison, representing Friends of Family Farmers, and I am leaving at 3 for a pre-existing meeting, just FYI. Or I'm leaving at, yes, 3 o'clock.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Alice. Thanks for being here. Gordon, then Jim.
I'm Gordon Howard. I'm the Community Services Division Manager for the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Jim Johnson. I'm the Working Lands Policy Director for 1000 Friends of Oregon.
Thanks, Jim. Barbara and then Maitreya.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barbara Boyer, and I'm a farmer in rural McMinnville. And I am the liaison representative for the Land Conservation Development Commission. And I do not have a seat at the table today, so I will be off the camera the whole meeting, but I'm here listening to learn from you all.
Super. Thanks.
Maitreya Sinha. I'm the senior rural planner with Washington County.
Thank you. Matt and Emily.
Matt Lizzie, farmer, Central Oregon.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. Emily.
Yeah, Emily Iverson and Wooden Shoe Tulip Farm.
Super. Thank you. And let me just see, there are a couple other folks who have their cameras off. I don't want to be hiding the ball for anyone, so I'm going to call on you, Nancy Pionk.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nancy Pionk, and I work with Donna, and I'm here to support the RAC process. Take notes.
Yeah, and help with the summary. Thank you so much for that. Matthew Hampton.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I'm the Junior Rules Coordinator at DLCD. I'm just here to help with the technical aspects of the Zoom.
Super. Thank you. And I know you've got your hands full there with people in the waiting room. Thank you, Matthew. Casaria, Aurora, Brandon, and Ryan. Those are those are the folks who are up next that I haven't seen or heard from yet. So thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Casaria Taylor, Senior Rules Coordinator for DLCD.
Thanks, Casaria.
And good afternoon, my name is Aurora Jettle. I'm a legislative and policy analyst. I'm stepping in for Alexis and Alyssa, who are out in Eastern Oregon right now.
Super. Okay, thank you. Brandon?
I'm Brandon Wright, Marion County Planning Director. I'm here because Austin Barnes has another commitment this afternoon.
Great, thank you. We appreciate you making time to be here. And Ryan?
Ryan Crable with the Oregon Farm Bureau.
Okay, great. Well, for those of you who may be watching this from the outside, you will have noticed that we have a really rounded group of people who are representing a variety of different interests here on the RAC. And they have been speaking in favor of the different things that are important to everyone. So I appreciate everybody sharing your insights about all of this. And I see that Kirsten has her hand up.
Sorry, Donna, thank you. Thanks for covering the operating principles. I just wondered if anyone had any questions about them. I know we all agreed to them, but I just wondered if anyone had any questions before we move into the content.
I mean, I plan to talk with you guys after this. I think I understand what the operating principles are, but at this point, I'm not comfortable deferring my comments on this to DLCD because I don't share the same opinion about the rules as the department, and so I'm not sure how to proceed that way.
Oh, cool. Samantha, thank you. We should let's definitely meet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, I think a conversation about that is a great idea. And finding out, how far apart are you on these sorts of things? Because I think that, that was the tough part about last time is that I don't think we were able to explain enough that these were concepts that were put out there for people just to reflect on and have conversation about. Okay. Mike, do you have a question about the operating principles?
Yeah, I do. In view of the fact that there's so much social media out there attacking the process, how do we go forward and have an unbiased, objective process? And how does the governor's office and ODA, et cetera, get a reasonable impression of how people in the farm zone feel when only one side is really very active in social media? That's sort of my question.
Okay.
Donna,
Kirsten,
mind if I
please.
take that? Thank you. Mike, thank you. Hence the reason for the pause, Mike. It's become a little more than a typical rulemaking advisory committee process. So if you'd just with grace, give us a little space to kind of reflect on what's been going on. And as far as your being at the RAC and how do we, participate objectively, As Donna's always said, please bring who you are. You're here for a reason, each and every RAC member. We're grateful. It wouldn't be balanced if you weren't here. So just please, bring forward what you know from your experience. And as we move through the 3 remaining topics today, I know there's been a lot out there, and I'm sorry. I also know that it's been a time, as Anka spoke to so clearly, that it's been a time of anxiety, and I do think there's been some nomenclature misunderstandings that we have that have made people additionally concerned, and no one needs that right now. There's enough going on in the world and challenging and just getting through basic life that we don't need additional anxiety. So give us some time to kind of clarify, do some research with the counties on what different things are called. Meet the Department of Agriculture. I see Lindsay's hand is up next, but I would say, Mike, just kind of be who you are if that works. So can I hear from Mike back to see if that helps?
Yeah, I would like to have a follow-up question or comment and question. I don't see how it's possible at this point to have a reasonable RAC with the amount of bias there is out in the system being presented to the governor's office without the other side being represented, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wonder why there's any point in proceeding.
But let's get through today, Mike. Let's get through the 3 remaining topics, and then we'll see, and we'll definitely be back in touch with RAC members. I understand it's a little bit different than what members applied for. So if you can hang on with us today, we'd be grateful. We really look for RAC members' guidance on these 3 remaining issues and the impact statements. Does that work, Mike? Stay with us. Thank you.
And and the other thing I would say from a process perspective is that you are the ones that are invited to the table, right? So I think of the RAC, if you think of looking up in the sky and there's a bunch of birds in the sky and there's one that's in the lead and everyone else is following behind. You all are the ones that are in the lead on this right now. There will be plenty of time for public conversation and input coming after this. And that's why we said, we had the public comment for this session last time. This time really is a work session for all of you to listen to each other and hear each other. I want to urge you not to just do point counterpoint. That's one of the reasons in those operating principles that we have them there. Keep the conversation here and, don't have the surprises. So you don't get in a place where everybody's doing point counterpoint and hoping that they can out tactic or out position or whatever. Because here we're trying to work together as a team. And I know some of you don't feel like team members, and I appreciate that that it's out there. We can't control that. We can only control what's right here. And we've got the governor's office sitting here and others. So
right, but what we hear from the governor's office is, and I don't know what their influence is on the process, maybe it's oversized, but they already have a goal in mind. And it seems like there's really no purpose for the RAC if the governor's office has a goal in mind.
I just want to step in and say,
I'm going to let the hang on.
Yeah,
Sandy.
I mean, I'm happy to do that, but
hang on. I want to let the governor's office respond to that. Thanks. No, I don't want us to go back and forth like that.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. We have received over 750. That was just within the first 24 hours of what we've been seeing on social media. So I'm assuming it's in the 4 digits, but I would need to ask our constituent services team. But as far as I know, we received over 750 constituent inquiries concerned about what is going on at the rulemaking level. I think, Michael, from our perspective, it is, I think to Donna's point about not going tit for tat here, we are looking to find solutions, create clarity, make sure the public knows exactly what is going on at the state level, how we're engaging with RAC members, and what is the next step in this process. And that is really the goal at hand. I think we are still very much in the middle of this rulemaking process and in the RAC process. So I don't think there is any kind of influence being had. I think what I am seeing is a lot of concern from folks that there is a proposed rule to close farm stands, and that is not necessarily the case right now. So figuring out how we proceed and make sure that folks feel at ease about where we currently are in this rulemaking process is really important.
So how does the governor's office not take those 750 into account when they were not appropriate?
That's a great question, and I'm happy to save that for how we apply that to the guiding principles, because I do think those were specific to members of the RAC and not necessarily to external folks. So I'm going to defer that to Donna as the facilitator who set those principles with you at the start of this
No,
RAC.
I think that's right. I think we can, that was the risk that the agency agreed to take for this one, is to open this up for public comments, and the RAC members are the ones that we can have operating principles with and remind you of if things go outside. These are on YouTube. This is being live streamed right now. So all sorts of people can look and see what it is and take things in or out of context, right? When the things I saw didn't look like they were in the context that I had been following in this process. So I think we have to make the best use here. We have this one last session to get through to look at the topics, provide that input that the commission asked for. And then we're going to stop and regroup and figure out what happens with the comments, what happens next. How do we move this forward in a way that is positive?
Forgive me.
Yeah, please.
Don,
Kirsten
forgive me.
and then Lindsay.
Right, because we do need to get into, you're convened here to consider the 3 last topics and to comment on the impact statement. So we just need to shift to that quickly, because
Yes.
I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to close my camera and be listening. There's nothing in the charge, and I think that Hillary has that to reshare. There's nothing in the charge about closing farm stands down in Oregon. So I think there's just a tremendous amount of fear out here, and I'm really sorry about that, because that is nothing that's come from this agency. So it's to, define these things. We had a limited scope of items for the charge, and we're grateful for you signing up to work through these issues. So let's just, you did not sign up to, consider all the public comment. We didn't launch a process to garner public comment. So I think you just, bring yourself, use your wisdom, and let's get back to the content. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, thank you. Lindsay.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't want to delay things any further. I just wanted to, I appreciate your comment, Kristen, about a bit of a nomenclature issue in terms of how counties are regulating agritourism, sometimes under farm stand permits. I just wanted to ask, are we going to address that today, or are we not far enough along in the discovery process to adequately really look at that issue yet?
Great question.
No, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Donna. It's we need to do some research. We're just aware of that coming up in one county, but I could easily realize when I discovered it this morning and talking to a farmer that there's some nomenclature crosswalk that we need to do. So we'll bring that back in due time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nomenclature, definitions, making sure that what the counties have, what the state has, that they line up. So yeah, we're a little ahead of that right now, is what I'm hearing you say, Kirsten. Yeah. Okay. Samantha, and then I want to move to Hillary to get us into our topics.
I didn't want to bring up this next point I'm going to make until later, but I think I'll just do it now. I am totally on board with finding ways to make sure that the public and that people fully understand exactly what we are talking about, because I myself have seen many people, jump to like the very farthest conclusion of what's happening here. But I really don't agree with some of the commentary on nomenclature and some of the statements that I've seen made by the department along those lines, because I feel like it does somewhat discredit the very real concerns that people have about being shut down or going out of business or being so frustrated that they don't want to be in the state anymore. And so I just want to ask that when we talk about that, I would really like us to be conscious of not being so in the weeds and technical that we lose sight of the forest through the trees. Of like, we have a lot of farmers out there they're not lawyers, they're not land use experts, they're farmers and business people. And I just really want to be sensitive to the fact that they're scared and speaking from emotion. And that's what we all need to hear in the big picture. And then the last thing I wanted to say before we get into the details, I want to say thank you to Donna, because I do not agree that this RAC cannot move, that this RAC process itself is in any way like the public is having their feedback. The public is having their policy response, but we have all been given the opportunity to speak this entire time and make our points clear. And I think that Donna and staff has done a good job of that through this process. Well, I'm on the camp of people that don't agree with the ultimate outcome, but I can at least acknowledge that this has been fair, and I think today will be fair as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and for those who feel like it's not and feel like you can't participate, then you are not bound to be here, right? You are here volunteering, and we so appreciate you being here and sharing your ideas. So, and if you feel like this is something that you just can't, you just don't see how it's going to work for you, then we don't want to hold you up. I do, however, want to now shift channels and move it back to Hillary. And Hillary, let you talk a little bit about, do you want to say more about that charge, or has enough been said about it?
I'm happy to say more about the charge, but also I wanted to touch in on the agenda for today. And Kirsten, if you wanted to say anything about the agenda modification, or if you just want me to cover it. So today our discussion is going to be focused on the language concepts involving the use of temporary structures for promotional activities, further defining processed and prepared foods, and on development standards that are intended to reduce the potential for conflicts with neighboring farms. And these are the concepts that we've been developing in conversation with the advisory committee. So one of the things that you may notice is not on here is any concept related to compliance, enforcement, or mediation. And I just want to communicate, and this is in materials that we've been publishing on our website, that the department is choosing not to move forward with a concept on that topic. And I'll go back a little bit to the charge. So the charge that we've got up here, this rulemaking process started as a conversation in the 2025 legislative session. However, given the complexity and controversial nature of this issue, it was decided a rulemaking space would be a more appropriate venue where we could appropriately discuss these concerns. A rulemaking process typically allows more time. It usually provides for more inclusive conversations, deeper conversations about improving farm stand policies. And so we were asked to engage our RAC in a discussion on 5 topic areas that were identified in the 2025 agritourism work group. So at our first meeting, we discussed the primary use of a property hosting a farm stand and the primary focus of a farm stand development. And we had some concepts coming out of that discussion. Our second meeting was devoted to a discussion of promotional events that are authorized statutorily in conjunction with a farm stand, and also on where they can take place. Our third meeting, we discussed processed foods and prepared foods that can be offered at farm stands. And we also discussed the potential for impacts to folks farming in the area, so neighbors. And then last week, we began our discussion on staff's thoughts on what we'd heard during those first 3 meetings and what we reviewed and written comments submitted, and how we had translated that into some language for consideration. So, and again, I do want to pause and thank everyone here on the RAC and others who had taken the time to provide constructive comments, proposed language to the agencies. We received a lot of really great creative suggestions and ideas to consider. Kirsten, did you want to say anything else about the schedule or the charge? Or I'm not the schedule, the agenda and the charge.
No, Hillary, I think you did a beautiful job as usual. Okay. I'm just hoping that because we won't be talking about the enforcement element anymore, and that was on the, for folks listening, that was on page 7 of the July 11th packet that we've all been reviewing. That is a director's decision not to carry that forward anymore. We've heard from some counties that they don't have the capacity for that. So that guidance was very meaningful. So yeah, just to winnow down, we've dropped that one, and hopefully we can use the time that we would have scheduled for that today in this introductory, really important conversation. I will say if we do nothing else today, Donna, I'm going to ask for your help to get us to that fiscal impact statement. It's a sort of a regulatory hurdle. It's also important that we hear most importantly, that we hear from folks, but we won't be able to proceed if we don't get RAC guidance on the fiscal impact statement. We could take RAC members' guidance on the other items if we get short on time, but I think we can get there. I don't think we'll need 20 minutes for next steps. So just hoping we can dive in. I'm going to be quiet and go off camera. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to set my own personal alarm here to go off at 3:20 so that we have about 40 minutes. Make sure we got plenty of time to wrap up today.
Great.
Okay, great. Take it away, Hillary.
Great. Thanks, Donna. So I know we've talked about this almost every single meeting, but there may be some folks who are following along new to the discussion. So it's really important in these conversations to keep in mind how farm stands are permitted in Oregon. So farm stands are a very specific, what we call sub 1 use or use of right in an area that's been zoned for exclusive farm use. So for this category of allowable uses for this permitting category, counties have to offer this as an option for folks in their jurisdiction. And counties cannot impose more strict land use limitations than what's in statute or rule. And just as a side note, I'm intentionally stressing land use limitations here because there are often other agencies involved in the regulation of farm stand activities, public works, county health, sanitation, OLCC. Those are not land use regulations. Those are not land use standards. So this conversation is really focused on the land use permit. So because farm stands are what planners refer to as a sub 1 use or an outright use, there is an assumption that a farm stand permitted under the standards that are set in statute and rule is inherently compatible with farm operations in the surrounding area. It's appropriate, compatible in an agricultural environment. So an applicant for a farm stand does not have to address potential impacts on their neighbors as a part of that permit review process. And so a lot of the discussion is revolved around, and we'll get this as our last topic today, how you ensure that how you mitigate for the potential for conflicts with neighbors. All right. So that's just a little bit of background before we go into the discussion. So we're going to start with temporary structures. Then we're going to talk about processed prepared foods at farm stands. And then we'll talk about a proposal for farm stand development standards. Okay. So moving into our first topic, temporary structures. So as it is right now, statute currently prohibits the use of farm stand structures for banquets, public gatherings, or public entertainment. And there's some case law out there, the holdings in the Greenfield case, common law, that we've discussed in earlier meetings, that provide that temporary structures are also subject to that limitation. So that means that currently no farm stand structures, including temporary tents or canopies, could be used for entertainment, public gatherings, or banquets. So that means that those promotional activities that are authorized by statute can only occur out of doors, or they have to be something that's not entertaining or it doesn't involve a banquet or public gathering, right? So several of our RAC members cited this prohibition on the use of temporary shelter for promotional events as a health and safety issue. But again, there are a variety of opinions on the issue. Some RAC members expressed concern that temporary structures can become permanent in practice. They could allow a larger scale of activity than is permitted by statute. However, based on our conversations, staff did suggest the following language for consideration on this particular topic that we've been discussing. So we're proposing new language that would allow temporary structures to be used for a fairly narrow purpose, for the purpose of sheltering visitors that are participating in promotional events that are authorized under the farm stand rule. We also added a definition here to clarify that temporary structures include structures like tents, canopies, chairs, benches, and tables that are sited and used on the property for no more than 90 days in a calendar year. And we're also clarifying that temporary structures does not include food trucks. So we had a couple of comments that were submitted by some RAC members who aren't available to attend today here on this point, suggesting that we might clarify what we mean by cited and used. I think in our last meeting, I had shared that the intention there, cited and used, was to make sure there was no confusion around the ability to store tents and chairs and stuff like that on the property, so they can be cited on the property and used on the property for no more than 90 days in the calendar year. I think we had a question on, whether that was consecutive days. The way that it's worded, it would be total of 90 days throughout the year. All right. So with that introduction, I'd love to open up the discussion. So take it away.
So thoughts on this one? Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I'm curious, two things. Does a temporary structure allow a permanent concrete floor that would be there forever? That's my first question. My second one is the events or activities that are not allowed in a permanent farm stand structure, are all those then allowed in a temporary structure?
Thank you, Mike. That's an excellent question. So as far as a concrete pad or something like that, that could not be provided as a temporary structure provision here. And as far as your second question, so yes, the idea is that if there's a promotional event that's being hosted on the property, say an entertaining event or some sort of public gathering that is intended to promote products that are being sold at the farm stand, then they could take place in these temporary structures, as long as those structures are being used for the purpose of sheltering the visitors.
Okay.
Okay.
And this health and safety issues, what was that shelter perspective that we've heard, correct, Hillary? It was the heat, it was the cold, it was the rain, it was those sorts of things that.
That's correct. And I would also note that the definition for temporary structure here applies also into to our earlier conversation about distinguishing what is a farm use and what requires a farm stand permit. And so this definition here is a little bit broader than the just for temporary structures that can be used to shelter visitors. Okay, so that's why we've got the chairs, benches, tables there.
Okay. All right. So we've got more hands up of some input or questions. Brandon, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So the temporary structures can vary so much across the state. Depending on where in the state you're doing it and what kind of crops you have, you might have it up all summer, or just could vary so much that maybe one size fits all and the rules won't work. And instead, if we have to regulate temporary structures, it should be something that locally we do on our own by county to decide what works for us, what works for our type of ag, and what the community would accept and think is appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so in terms of the language that Hillary was proposing there as potential language, does that look like it's too restrictive to you at this point, as opposed to the definitions?
I think it should be counties may adopt local regulations to regulate temporary structures.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you for clarifying that. Samantha. And then Maitreya.
Yeah, so I have two concerns about this as drafted. One, chairs and benches and tables aren't, I don't think, structures in the context of what we are talking about for this rule. And right now, I don't think there is a limitation on how often you can have how many days a bench can be on your property or not. And so I don't think that the inclusion of chairs, benches, and tables is appropriate. And I also have concerns about the 90 days. I agree with what Brandon was saying, is that it's too variable out there to do a one size fits all amount of time. And so depending on the commodity, depending upon what you're doing, you could go way more than 90 days of needing a tent out there. Again, it shouldn't be there 365 because then that's permanent and not temporary anymore. But I support the idea of having this be more of a localized approach in terms of the days.
Okay. Thank you for that, Maitre. And
Can I ask one question here? So I again want to remind folks that this definition for temporary structure also applies to the clarification of when a farm stand permit is required and when something can be permitted as a farm use. So this definition is doing double duty in that earlier topic that we discussed. I've got it in my, so I just wanted to remind folks of that.
Well, I actually have a follow-up comment on that. So thank you, Hillary.
So
I expressed this at the last meeting, but my concern is that the focus of temporary structure in the top language, if you are just selling your own farm crops on your farm, that's a farm use. And I feel like this language is confusing because it only kind of provides that clarification for a temporary structure. If you're only selling your own farm crops on your property, it shouldn't matter whether it's temporary or permanent. That's an outright use that you shouldn't have to get land use approval for. And I think that this should be made more clear or an additional sentence added to just provide that clarity.
Thank you. We did have some comments that were submitted asking us to clarify when permanent structures could be used. For example, if it was an existing structure. And so that's something that we're thinking about as well.
Okay. All right. And we've got that comment. Thank you, Samantha. Let's hear from Maitre, Alice, Sid, Mike, Jim, and then I'm going to check with others who we haven't heard from yet, see if there's anything you want to add on this topic before we move on to the next one shortly. So, Maitre, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify. So, am I correct in understanding that if existing farm stands want to start using temporary structures, or the farm to table allowances for going forward, then this would be treated as an expansion of the farm stand and subject to land use review initially, at least, correct?
Thank you, Maitre. So if I'm not quite following your question here. So if a farm stand wants to engage in activities or expand their farm stand operation, then yes, that beyond what was permitted under the terms of the original approval, that would require a new permit. However, what we're seeing here is that temporary structures could be used to shelter folks that are participating in promotional events. So if those promotional events were already authorized under the original permit, I don't think a new permit would be required in this case.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Alice?
I think that our farmers, I totally understand the need to accommodate different types of cropping structures. I would like us as a group to agree on at least a framework for counties to decide, because I think that the thing that's the most frustrating to the people that I work with and that we hear over and over again, and was a feature of my written comments, is that it's very difficult for farmers to plan ahead and make arrangements if every county gets to have a different approach to deciding how many days are allowed. So if we are going to take an approach that has a different number of days for each county or region or what have you, I would really like to see DLCD laying out the criteria of how those things are decided very clearly, so that we're getting some continuity in decision making, if not a blanket number. I think that I totally understand the need to accommodate different cropping structures, but the feedback that I'm getting from my farmers is that having different rules in different counties is the problem, because it's too hard to predict what they're allowed to do. So as much uniformity in decision making as we can have, the better.
Decision making and guidance about that decision making, it sounds like. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Alice. And thanks for the comments you've been sending as well. Thank you all for your comments. Sid.
Yeah, so as some RAC members, myself included, expressed at an earlier meeting, what really matters is the use rather than the length of time a structure, whether a structure is permanent or impermanent. I support the allowance for temporary structures as proposed for the first category in determining whether or not a farm stand permit is needed. But the legislature has already determined that farm stand structures cannot be used for banquets, public gatherings, or public entertainment. And the legislator made no distinction between permanent and temporary structures. I'm concerned that we not use, or that the department not use, the rulemaking process to, how can I phrase this? I don't want to say subvert, but get around the legislative intent when the legislation was adopted. And I don't believe that uses that are not allowed in structures by statute should be backdoored in through a rule that allows them in temporary structures.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that comment, Sid. Mike? And then Jim, and then Sam.
Yeah, a couple things. I kind of agree with Samantha on the chairs, benches, and tables. I'm not quite sure why we have that in there, that level of detail. Maybe I don't understand it. The one thing, like Sid mentioned, though, that some of these rules we're creating are just going to end up in litigation after litigation. And I was hoping we would get to a point in this RAC where we reduce the amount of litigation, and I think we're increasing the amount of litigation. The other thing is, we weren't really going to talk about enforcement, but what I've observed watching land use in Oregon for 4 years now, as I've mentioned, a lot of people will violate the 90 days. And unless you somehow set the 90 days in a permit, it will be violated. And that's an important thing. And so one neighbor will be doing it for 6 months, and the other neighbor will be complaining because he's doing it for 90 days and following the law. This happens every day in the land use system. And it's very odd to me that the land use system has laws and rules that nobody follows, but all the other agencies, which I deal with as a farmer, ODF, ODA, BOLI, OSHA, all have rules that they enforce, and they all have rules where there's fines. And so I think we've got to have that conversation that there's really no point in putting 90 days in there because it will not be enforced.
Okay, great. Thanks for that comment. And we'll make sure that the commission hears about that. I think the enforcement part wasn't part of the original charge, and so that's where some determinations may be made. Jim, then Sam and Inga, although I did say, Sam, I'm going to go make sure I heard from folks that I haven't heard from yet on this topic. So I will come back to you. I'm going to come, you're going to be there. I still see your hand. So Jim, then Inga. And if there's anyone else before Sam, let me know, and then we'll get Sam. Jim.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's really important again here, and we've talked about this at the start of this, to recognize the difference between farm stands and agritourism. When you start to use temporary structures, or you want to use temporary structures for things related to events, those should be going through the agritourism process. They shouldn't be hidden as a farm stand and the like. And that gets to Sid's comment, which I agree with, is the real issue here is the use. What's going on in that and the like. And if it's becoming an event, it's becoming that type of thing, they need to be going through the agritourism statutes, not through the farm stand statutes. I think it's really important, and to get to another point that Sid said, we're dangerously treading on areas where we're going to be violating state statute. the courts have interpreted the statute in the Greenfield case to say temporary structures need to be treated the same as permanent structures in terms of the use and the like. We've got to be careful to not go beyond that. That's a legislative issue. It is not a rule issue, because that's the statute that was interpreted by the courts, not an administrative rule. So we just need to be really careful there. I think, bottom line, temporary structures, whether it's 90 days, 9 days, 900 days, what's going on in those structures is really what's important in terms of how that's going to comply with the farm stand statutes.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Inga, I don't see any other hands. So after Inga is Sam.
Going back to the by right farm stand use, I would have difficulty as someone explaining to a public person wanting to do that, okay, this is a by right use, you can do this as a farm use, but yet you can only put up a farm stand for 90 days, or the structure to do that for 90 days. I'm sure I would get questions, why would that be? Because this is a use that is a farm use, so why am I limited to 90 days?
For the temporary structure itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I agree that chairs, benches, and tables, which shouldn't be in there as a temporary structure in that definition. I don't have an opinion one way or the other about allowing temporary structures, but I would say that I would not be able to say whether someone had their temporary structure up for 90 days or not. I'm not going to go out before they put it up, when they put it up, and then figure out and put anything on my calendar to say, okay, now they have to take it down. That's not something I'm going to track. So.
Okay. Very to the point. Thank you for that, Inga. That's great. Really helpful. Super. Everybody, that's great. Wonderful. Thank you, Sam. Next.
Yeah, so I appreciate everything Inga just says, and I agree. I mean, I'm two things. I'm supportive of a localized approach on this, but we're always in that sticky place with local control of but I also want them to allow them for longer than 90 days. So I would worry again, maybe that some counties could potentially be overly limiting on that. I hope that they wouldn't, but that does always worry me in the back of my mind sometimes. But really, I think I want to highlight the use part and what, Jim was just saying. It's Jim's opinion that agritourism events shouldn't go through the farm stand statute, but that's not what the statute says. It says they can do promotional events, and that is how most agritourism events are happening, not through the agritourism event permit statute. And that's for a whole host of reasons. One, they're conditional uses. Two, they're really difficult to get. People don't want to pay lawyers to have to go through a whole public process. And they're discretionary, and most counties don't offer them. So the reality is that most agritourism events are happening through farm stand permits. However, and the issue of why I was really advocating throughout this RAC for the temporary structures was the issue of that we had people for exactly what we're talking about here saying, well, we can't use tents for our farm to table dinners because the statute says we can't have banquets. We can't use this for inclement weather because the statute says this. So in a way, I do agree with Jim in that if the department does not feel that they have clear authority to be able to do this, I would rather have the department make that clear to the legislature and make a recommendation that the legislature change that instead of risking adopting a rule that's just going to be litigated.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that, Sam. Emily and Lindsay on this one.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say from our perspective on our farm, we do use lots of tents during our tulip festival, which Yeah, for various reasons. But I just want to say that we do them seasonally and it's all based on seasonality. So I don't know. I don't part while we would still fit within the 90 days of calendar year, I know a lot of farms that will be open as early as April for tulips and they'll be closed for pumpkins in October. And so I would base it more based on the seasonality opportunity, because no one wants to put a tent up in Oregon in January, but there's Christmas trees in December, so they might need it for that.
Right.
And so I would just want to push that a little bit. And then I also think that the benches, tables, and chairs really should be taken out of there just because our staff uses picnic tables when they need to, and that's our farm laborers when they're on lunch. I want to be able to have a picnic table on our property when we need it.
Great point. Okay. Really helpful. Yeah, this is great. I love that you all are bringing your lived experience to this conversation. It makes it so much more real, right, than just these words on paper. So thank you for that, Emily. Lindsay and Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to address kind of again, the permits versus agritourism. It really appears like a lot of times these farm stands have not what you would necessarily classify as an event, but it's their business for the entire season, right? And I think that clearly the agritourism permit is designed around events. So I'm just wondering if that's been a point that's been litigated already, or two, whether along with concerns about nomenclature and counties doing it differently, if this is something that is maybe a suggestion to the legislature again, that we maybe update for more modern standards of agritourism, farm stand type of operations.
Right. Okay. And then that question is to someone. Hillary, I'm imagining it's either you or someone that you know on your team.
So these are different permitting pathways, right? So if you want a farm stand permit, the focus of that permit is going to be an opportunity to develop a business that is focused on the sale of farm products and livestock. So farm products and livestock, right? That's the farm stand permit and the purpose of that. In 2011, the legislature added an opportunity, 2013, the opportunity to host promotional events at a farm stand to promote products that the farm stand offers. However, the focus of that permit and the standards and statute and rule for farm stands are really focused around, the main activity, which is the sale of farm crops and livestock. When you want to host events on a property, the appropriate permitting pathway is either that agritourism other commercial events permit, which is focused on hosting events. And there's actually quite a long list of standards that are established by the legislature in statute for an agritourism permit that address things like parking and hours of operation and ingress, egress, maneuvering, that sort of thing. And there's different levels of event permit that is available through that opportunity. There's also other opportunities for more intensive types of retail operations or more intensive types of event operations through a different permitting pathway called the commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. So there are different permitting pathways with different standards, different criteria associated with them. And they're all established by the legislature. So it just depends on what the focus of your applicant's business streams are, right? So as a planner, you talk to your potential applicant and focus them into the correct permitting pathway, depending on what their sort of vision is for their commercial endeavor. So what we're talking about in this particular rulemaking really is the farm stand that's focused on the sale of farm crops and livestock. Those other opportunities are not part of this rulemaking right now. And I know there have been conversations about those other opportunities off and on in different legislative sessions, but that's not something that we're talking about right now.
Okay, great.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just respond to that? So I understand we're not talking about
Yeah.
farm stand, that we're not talking about agritourism permits, but I think my point was that I think, as Samantha mentioned, a lot of farm stands, one, I think we heard at the beginning of this that counties are interpreting farm stand and agritourism sometimes interchangeably. And we have a lot of farm stands that operate that are kind of have ongoing events, and it's not really like it's an everyday thing, and not a, you know, a specific event type thing. So that was more my question is, if it's already being done in the farm stand, do we really need to look broader at whether there is a pathway for it?
Thank you, Lindsay. So that would be a question for the legislature if they want to contemplate some sort of expansion of like a different type, maybe a sub-2 farm stand use that allows a more intensive type of business.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you both for that. Ryan, please. Ryan, Jim, Mike, Alice, Sam.
Yeah, just a quick question to clarify. So when we're talking about promotional events, does that include the sale of farm products?
Thank you, Ryan. So no. So oh, can somebody mute?
Yeah, sorry.
Whoever's saying. Oh, sorry. Thanks. So Ryan asked if the sale of farm products was included in promotional activities. No. So the purpose of a farm stand is the sale of farm crops and livestock, which includes processed farm crops and livestock. So things like jams, jellies, salsas. The legislature also provided an opportunity to sell retail incidental items and to collect fees for promotional activities at farm stands, but those are subject to an income limitation. So the tool that the legislature is using to try to ensure that the main focus of something permitted as a farm stand is that income limitation. So a farm stand can sell as many farm crops, livestock, processed farm products as they want. There's no restriction on that. There is a statutory restriction on income earned from the sale of retail incidental items and on fees collected from promotional events. So those retail incidental items and fees from promotional events are limited to 25% of the gross sales of the farm stand. That's statutory, and that is something that we cannot change in rule. Does that help, Ryan?
Kind of. I don't think it really got to, and it was probably because of the way I phrased the question. And I apologize. I'm in kind of a somewhat of a public area, you know, making things work the way that we anyhow, I guess if you have, because if you're operating a farm stand and you're like, if you're selling your products in a temporary structure, then is there any kind of limitation on how often that temporary structure is up?
Thank you, Ryan. So right now, and this is something we talked about at our, came a concept that developed in our first meeting, and we talked about last week as well, is when is a farm stand a farm use and when do you need a farm stand permit, right? And so, common practice at counties is to, it's my understanding that common practice for a number of counties is that if something is just a roadside stand, right? If you are selling products that you're producing yourself, then that doesn't need a farm stand permit, right? That's considered farm use. That's something that's expected to happen in a farm stand, right? But when you start selling products from other farms, you are building a new structure, hosting events, then that's something that would require that farm stand permit. So it gets back to that conversation of when is what you're doing considered a farm use and when does it need a farm stand permit? And that's something that we heard would be helpful to clarify in rule. And so that's what that sort of rule language is about. If that gets to your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to give it some more thought, but
happy to talk
that,
offline too. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But I would say also, I raised this before, but I think the 90-day, as others have mentioned here, I raised this in the last meeting, but I do think that the 90-day, I would reiterate that needs to, I think that needs to be tied maybe more to the schedule and the unique needs of the individual farms, and maybe not a one-size-fits-all approach. So
Yeah.
just for what it's worth.
Okay, good.
Great.
Very, very helpful. Thank you. And I know at one point we talked about doing some sort of a table that was like a, you know, what's allowed by use, what's allowed for with a farm stand permit, what's about allowed under agritourism. And that seems like that would be helpful for people to be able to see really quickly visual on this. I know some talked about that along the way. And the time between the last meeting and this meeting was so short, we couldn't get everything today that we thought might be helpful. One thing I do want to point out that I had seen in some of the, I don't know if it was reporting or where I saw it, but people saying that this group came together out of nowhere and they're meeting down in Salem. I hope everyone can learn, just from having seen what Ryan was doing there. We are not together in Salem. We are all over the state. And we are all online. So, no one is having a secret meeting down in Salem. We're all over the place. Right, Alice? We're all over the place. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, Ryan. We'll see if we can keep working to clarify that. Jim, and then I'm going to pop over to, Jim, have you spoken? You've already spoken on this topic once. And Alice has not, I think, right? So I'm going to go, Alice, have you spoken on this topic? I'm going to come back to you, Jim. I promise.
I said something briefly. I just want to ask a clarifying question, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
So I think that I've received a lot of communications lately saying that by these rules would be limiting people's current ability to hold fee-based events or host food trucks at their farm stand or on their farm in general. And I just want to ask the clarifying question, is there any amount of fee-based educational event or hosting of a farm stand that's currently allowed without a farm stand or agritourism permit? Does that question make sense?
It does. So if I'm hearing you as someone who doesn't understand this stuff much, you're asking, is this a farm use to be able to do the activities you're talking about, or do you need a permit in order to do them?
Yeah, just to put it on the record so we all understand, if you do not hold a farm stand permit and you do not have an agritourism permit, is there any amount of promotional event you are allowed to do on your farm where you are accepting fees for that promotional?
Yeah, great question.
So typically, you're asking what can be conducted as a farm use with no permit, right, Alice?
As an event, right?
So typically, and again, this isn't in rule, it's not necessarily in statute, but if you're collecting fees, there has been interpretation, in many counties across the state that then becomes a commercial use and you need a permit for that. I know that there are differing perspectives on that, but that's not defined in statute or rule anywhere. And so we are hoping to clarify here when that's a farm use and we're also hoping to clarify that that's explicitly allowed as a promotional activity under the farm stand rules, because there's some question as to whether or not that was allowed at a farm stand as a promotional activity, because it's more educational in nature. And so we're proposing to clarify that here.
Yeah, does it require a permit then? Are you saying it would require a permit?
So if you're not collecting fees, no. And we are clarifying very clearly in a different section of rule under the promotional section that it is explicitly allowed to collect fees for educational activities as a promotional activity, even though it may be more educational than promotional. We still feel like there's a promotional aspect to it. And so we are clarifying that's allowed across the state in that language proposal.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, I know that there are different opinions on that topic.
Yeah, I just think one more clarifying question that I know we've been talking about the like the promotional events and promotional activities, and we just discussed kind of ongoing activities at the farm stand that are promotional in nature. And that's not something that, you would put on a calendar and say, once a year, I'm doing this thing. It's just like every time the farm stand is open, you could pay $5 and take a farm tour or get on the wagon and be pulled by the tractor or what have you. Those kinds of are we defining those two things differently when it comes to fee-based experiences on the farm, activities which are ongoing versus events? And are UPICs considered activities, or is that inherently farm use? Sorry, just clarifying.
Yeah.
Super.
There's a lot of hair splitting that's happening in these rules, and I can see it's like it gets a little confusing. So in our definition of when a farm stand permit is required, I think we very explicitly said that UPICs are a farm use. You don't need a farm stand permit for a UPIC if that's all you're doing. So if you have a blueberry patch and I'm going out there and I'm picking blueberries and I'm paying you for them and I'm leaving, there's no permit that's required for that. That's a farm use. And so our language that we're not discussing today, that we discussed last week, is intended to clarify that, right? And I apologize, Alice, I've used the words events and activities a little bit interchangeably in the discussion, so apologies if that causes any confusion. But again, the language around the promotional activities and the statutory phrase is promotional activities would not put any limitation on the number of activities that are occurring unless it was the farm to table meals, because we got a lot of comments on that particular aspect of the promotional activities language. But that so we talked about that last week. And so we want to focus on the topics that we're focusing on this week. But again, I'm happy to talk offline about that too.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Jim.
Yeah, this is getting to a lot of this is getting to my concern, and that is we need a better definition of what is a promotional event in terms of it relates to a farm stand. I'm concerned that somebody could bring a rock band in, and because they're wearing T-shirts that says the name of the farm stand, they have 500 people out there paying to see the concert, that would be considered a promotional event simply because they're wearing a T-shirt that says Jim's Farm Stand. That's not what a promotional event is, in my opinion. And I think we've got to look at that a lot better in terms of what is and is not a promotional event as it's associated with the farm stand. If it's the other type of thing, they need to go through the agritourism statute. And that brings me to my next point. I'm probably the only person in this rack that was a member of the agritourism work group years and years ago, and went through all that process. And the reason that we have an agritourism statute is about concerns of events and the like that have an impact on surrounding farming operations. And if we don't run these larger events and the like through the agritourism event stuff, there is no consideration of impacts to surrounding farming operations. And that is a really key component of the agritourism statute. And that was a lot of the discussion in that work group that was put together by the Association of Oregon Counties. Mary Stern was the chair of that sent recommendations to the legislature. Was these are the types of things we believe could potentially be impacting surrounding farming operations, other uses. They need to go through an agritourism permit instead of being considered some type of farm stand element. So I really think we need to be looking at the definition better of what is a promotional event, and making sure it really truly is secondary or focused on promoting that thing, as opposed to the promotional event becoming a primary use and having a predominant impact on the community.
Okay, great, very helpful. Thank you. Mike, Brandon, Sam.
It seems like we're making this overly complicated. Temporary structures that look like and act like a farm stand ought to be in the farm stand permit process, which is very simple. And it seems to me like if we did that, they'd obviously be able to operate all year if they wanted to, like a permanent structure. So that seems like the simplest route to go. The other thing is if it gets to be banquets and so forth, most of the group I work with and farmers I talk to are not opposed to a lot of things. It's all a matter of size and scale and number. And if we could limit the size and scale of number, we wouldn't be opposed to most things that could go on in a farm stand, but it's all size and scale and number. And as to the agritourism permit, it's not that complicated to do an impact test. You can do it at home and sit in your room because you know what every farmer does around you. But the problem is that most venues that people want to have a negative impact on the farmers around them. And that's the issue. That's the issue we don't talk about, is that if you go through the agritourism standard process, it demonstrates that you have a negative influence on the farmers around you.
Right. Okay, good. Thanks for clarifying that. And for really clearly saying what that interest is in terms of that impact on others. Really appreciate that. Brandon and then Samantha.
Thank you. So part of me kind of looks at this in a different direction, where a lot of farms we know use farm stands as part of their process in order to be successful. And I think we need to listen really carefully to what farmers need when they use farm stands to be successful, and ensure that the code represents the best practices that make these farms successful. If we end up there are conflicts with farms that don't use farm stands, then we can look at solutions for that, and we can make sure that health and safety, like traffic and septic and things like that, are taken care of. But I'm really pushing that these codes reflect the best things that can happen that can support farmers that use farm stands.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Brandon. Samantha?
Yeah, I'm very supportive of what Brandon just said. In my opinion, if a farmer wants to hire an awesome country rock band to come out to their farm for the day, and that attracts a bunch of people out there and promotes their farm stand, and then results in a bunch of people buying products for them that they otherwise wouldn't do because they would not have gone out to the farm stand, I think that's more than an appropriate promotional event. And if we look at the case in Greenfield, that's what the legislature intended, that there would be a wide variety of entertaining events and educational entertaining events to allow farmers that opportunity to bring people out to their business, subject to, which again, I think we just keep forgetting, there is a whole income restriction in statute that exists right now, 25% income restriction. The legislature did not go through and say, here's the types of events you can do. Here's the types of retail items you can do, for all the reasons why, you know, we're expressing concerns about that right now. It's not really realistic. They just said, you know, make sure that you're farm first, and most of how you're earning your living comes from actually farming and not just doing events or retail. So I just think we have some philosophical differences here about what should and should not be happening. And I just want to pin that, because a lot of the frustration I hear from folks about where these rules ended up is because it seems like this is really becoming like an academic philosophical exercise of what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And it's really divorced from the reality of what farmers need, as Brandon just said. And so I just think that we're missing the point of like what farmers are already doing and what farmers need. And that's probably, in my opinion, that is what the law should protect and allow.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that opinion. And Sid and Emily, I want to be mindful of time. We're talking about temporary structures. We have moved back to promotional activities. We did hear from everybody last time on promotional activities. So I just want to remind folks of that. We're not talking about promotional activities right now, although we have been. So I want to move us back to the temporary structures, and then I want to move us on to the process and prepared foods. So we still have processed and prepared foods and the farm stand developmental standards, right, Hillary?
Yes, we do. And I do want to make sure that we get to processed foods before Alice goes, because I know her organization particularly was concerned about that topic.
And I just saw hands come down. So thank you for that. Thank you for helping me move everyone on to those next topics. And maybe that's why your hands were up, to say, hey, come on, let's move along. We want to talk about these other things. So we're going to do that now. All right. Thank you. So Hillary, let's move us to the process and prepared foods.
All right, and just thank you, folks, for the conversation and the ideas as well on the first topic. And related to the definition of temporary structures, we have a lot of food for thought and things to chew on. All right, so
Unintended.
which is a great segue into
Right.
this next topic, which is prepared foods. With a direct tie to the farm operation or local agricultural area. That's what the legislative work group came up with us to talk about. And so here we're talking about there's a difference between processed foods and prepared foods. Okay, that'll be important for this discussion. So back in 2006, LCDC adopted rule language that allows processed farm crops and livestock to be sold as farm crops. So the current rule language clarifies that prepared foods are not processed foods that are considered farm crops, right? So processed foods are considered farm crops and can be sold with no limitation at a farm stand. So in addition to your veggies, your frozen meat, or whatever it is, you can also sell pickles. You can also sell kimchi, jerky, dried herbs, different types of processed farm crops as a farm crop with no income limitation that's appropriate at farm stand. So we heard from some RAC members that there was a wish to clarify that farm crops and livestock include all processed items that are allowed by farm direct marketing laws. We did look into that, and we're proposing some language here that to modify our definition of processed crops and livestock that explicitly includes all of the methods of processing that are identified in the farm direct law. And we did add also a non-exhaustive list of examples. So again, that jam, pickles, syrup, apple cider, jerky, salsa, kimchi, as that sort of non-exhaustive list of what we're talking about when we're talking about processed farm crops. Okay. So then there are prepared food items. So prepared food items are sold as retail incidental items, subject to that income limitation of 25% of the gross sales at the farm stand, right? And the RAC did discuss clarifying what is included in that definition of prepared farm crops and livestock, as well as trying to put a little bit more definition around what is a prepared food item. And why am I not seeing it here? So I do need to clarify here that a farm stand permit does not authorize the processing of farm crops and livestock. Want to be clear about that. Farm crop processing is permitted as a farm product processing facility, which is authorized under a different pathway, permit pathway in statute 215, 255, or farm crops are processed through a home occupation permit, right? The processing of farm products is not authorized as a farm stand permit. Okay. So this is the language that we came up with based on that feedback. Farm crops and livestock includes both fresh and processed farm crops and livestock growing on the farm operation or grown on the farm operation and other farm operations in the local agricultural area. As used in the subsection, processed farm crops and livestock include farm products that have been converted into other products through canning, drying, baking, freezing, pressing, fermenting, dehydrating, pickling, freeze drying, butchering, or other similar means of adding value to the farm product, including the addition of incidental ingredients, but not including the conversion of farm products into prepared food items that are intended for on-site immediate consumption. Right. Such items may include, but are not limited to, products like jam, pickles, syrup, apple cider, jerky, salsa, and kimchi. So, yeah, there we are.
All right. And I just want to note while you were speaking that Kristen put in a note in the chat, just saying that there's a minor note when DLCD and Hillary in this context is using the term proposed at RAC meetings, she doesn't mean they're proposed for legislation or
Yeah.
proposed for the commission. I want to be super clear about that this time, right? This is proposed for RAC feedback and guidance. I'm not saying that to RAC. I'm saying that to others who might be watching this and confused, thinking that this has gone further than it has. This is proposed for exactly the kind of conversation we're having here and the input that we're getting from the RAC. So thank you, RAC members. Alice, I see your
Thank you,
hand.
Donna.
Go ahead. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for your attention to the farm direct producer process exemption and the reality that value-added products are very important to small farm revenue streams. In discussing this with the office hours that I've been hosting with the farmers that I work with, I also want to make sure that we're not so focused on value-added products that we accidentally exclude other crucial farm products from this definition, including nursery stock, seeds that are grown on the farm, like we represent a lot of specialty vegetable seed growers. And if you are packaging your own seeds to sell, and non-food farm items such as wool and fiber products, I just want to make sure that those get captured in that allowable, like no income cap agricultural product, farm crops and livestock space. And I think that my tunnel vision about making sure that all value-added products under the farm direct producer process exemption were included. Thank you for listening so diligently about that. I might have overlooked that we were creating a definition that would exclude nursery stock, seeds, and non-food products like fiber. I think we talk a lot about cut flowers, but making sure that that's explicitly noted or not excluded for the lawyers in the room, of which I'm one. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. That's really great feedback. We really appreciate that. And I saw lots of thumbs coming up from all sorts of different folks on that. So thank you for raising that to everybody's attention and getting that added. Good. Thank you, Sid, Brandon, Sam.
So I have a couple of clarifying questions, and depending on how the rule is intended, I may have I may have a comment on it. So is baking intended to include something like baked products? Is that intended to include something like Franz bread or crackers made at Nabisco's Portland plant?
Thank you, Sid. So no, that would include farm crops and livestock from that local agricultural area, or grown on the farm operation. So there needs to be some sort of nexus with being produced in Oregon or grown in Oregon. Does that help?
I'm not sure I'm not sure that's a clear answer, and the corollary is fermented products. Would that include 6 packs of Deschutes beer or 6 packs of Ninkasi beer? So again, how do you determine the nexus to Oregon products? And I think there needs to be some clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Sid. So traditionally, Oregon beers and wines have been included in that definition of processed crops and livestock when they're produced in the state.
Okay, so as I read the proposed rule for our discussion in its entirety, a farm stand is allowed as a matter of right. Someone could sell a few tomatoes or a token amount of their own farm product, sell unlimited amounts of 6 packs of beer to go, and hold promotional events to promote the sale of those 6 packs to go. I don't think that's the intention of farm stands. I don't think that's where the rule is intended to go. And I would like to see I suggest that there be some clarification in the rule to not allow that kind of activity or that kind of misuse of the farm stand statute or rule.
Thank you. I was just going to clarify that. I just want to remind you, this is a rule, not a statute. Thanks, Sid. Great. Brandon, also welcome to Eric. And I didn't welcome Lauren Lucht earlier. So welcome to the two of you. Lauren, I know you've been here for much longer than this, but seeing Eric pop in made me realize I didn't welcome you. So welcome. And go ahead.
Yes, I support keeping this as open as possible. I realize, I think I understand Sid's concerns that it could turn into a supermarket, but this definition does say crops grown on the farm operation. And so when a customer goes out to the farm, they see amazing products. But then to see the great stuff the farmer knows to do with that product, really invest that consumer so much more in our farm area to know that they can get really great products that are beyond just the raw product out of it. We go shopping for these specialty items in stores locally all the time. They come from all over the country. But for consumers to know you can do that same great stuff right here, and farmers have these ideas on products to make right here, to see that on the farm themselves is so critical to making sure that people support the farming that we do. So keeping this as broad as possible so people can go there and experience this. And to Sid's point, unless you're growing, I'm not sure how beer is made exactly, unless you're growing the barley or something like that on that farm operation, they wouldn't, that's not the kind of crop that I see that this would be. But there are, like in Independence, they're growing the crops that go into some of the beer. If you want to show up there and try that beer that they're growing the crop that goes into, like the lavender or whatever, then that's part of that. So I think this is good. I think it's good to open it up.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate that. Sam?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that we still have the 25% income restriction in statute. These clarifications are in addition to statutory restrictions that these rules cannot change. So no
Okay.
matter what we do here, we will still have also the statute, which says retail items and non-promotional events cannot exceed more than 25% of the income of the farm stand. So I just want to remind everyone that these are additional restrictions on top of that restriction. And then the other thing I just want to flag is prepared foods. So the Nabisco cookie, I guess, or really more likely like the apple cider donut and the other things that the public loves and is used to going and getting at the farm stands. How I have seen that allowed is as a retail incidental item subject to the 25% income restriction, not as a processed farm crop or a farm crop. I want a flag because I don't have, my concern with this does not lie in this language. It lies in the definition of retail incidental item that we have potentially prevented a lot of those prepared foods from not being able to be sold anymore, or we've caused a significant amount of confusion that does not make clear that those prepared foods can be sold. And that's really important to the people that I represent and the public. They want to be able to go to the pumpkin patch and get the apple cider donut. Like that's a part of the experience, and I don't think that causes any harm, and I think we should make sure that we're protecting that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that, Sam. Sid, Mike, Lindsay, and then we'll see how we're doing, and we may be moving to the next one.
Speaking to Brandon's point and to I think Sam's point, maybe the farm stand rule allows a farm stand to not just grow farm products, not just sell farm products grown on their own farm, but anywhere in Oregon. So the rule would in fact allow a farm stand to sell unlimited amounts of beer as long as it had, let's say, Oregon hops as a processed farm product without it being subject to the 25% rule. So I think that's the concern. And I think the concern is, it's not about 90 or 95% of the farm stand owners who are farmers who have no interest in doing something that's going to have an outsized impact on their neighbors. The concern is the 5% of that's out there that we know from experience are going to exploit any loophole in the rule and do something like open up a store that sells 6 packs of beer to go, holds concerts as promotional events to promote the sale of that beer, and sells a token amount of, I don't know, lavender or something that they grow on their plot. So that's the concern, and that's what I think a well-crafted rule should make sure it avoids.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, Mike, and then Lindsay and Sam and Brandon wanna just encourage people not to be doing point counterpoint, just sharing new information that we maybe haven't heard yet, and more importantly, suggestions, as opposed to general comments of what you want. The staff is showing you, here's their language they got. If you've got real changes you want to see, suggestions for them, give that to Hillary. Mike, Lindsay, Sam.
Within the processed farm crops, there has to be a percentage of that processed farm crop that actually qualifies. And the apple cider donut's a good one, but if they're 2% items from a farm or an Oregon farm, and the 98% of whatever it is that a processed farm crop? And unfortunately, we see that type of thing. The other thing is, I'm very curious on this, how many people have actually tried to do an audit of the 25% issue? And I suspect there's probably almost nobody on here that has. Well, I have several times. It's very difficult to even rely on that, unfortunately, is very difficult.
So that's really a question for the county planners, right? You're the ones that are the ones that are supposed to be looking at that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But hopefully DLCD and LCDC will look at it in terms of, does it really mean anything ever?
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anyone jump to open their microphone. So thank you, Mike, for that comment. And I'll turn to Lindsay, Sam, and Brandon.
As usual, I just have more questions, but so I just wanted to clarify. I think Sam said it earlier, and I think it's an important point. Are prepared foods allowed as a retail incidental items with a farm stand permit under the 25%? And if so, are they also subject to some of these requirements that they have some tie to what is actually being grown at that time on the farm?
Thank you, Lindsay. This is a good question. So let me try to clarify this a little bit more. So prepared food items that are served with the intention that they be eaten immediately on site, right? Not a pie in a box with a sticker that you're going to take home off site or to a party or something like that, but something that's served on site is typically considered a retail incidental item that falls under that income limitation, right? So in a different section of conversation, we talked about requiring that there be some sort of relationship between retail incidental items and the farm products being sold at that farm stand. So if both of those sections of language were to be adopted, and again, we're very early in the process and there's no, it would be up to the commission whether to adopt rules or not much later in this year. Then the impact would be that retail incidental item would have to have a relationship with the products that are being sold at the farm stand, right? Farm products being sold at the item. So that prepared food item would have to have some sort of ingredients or really, would need to be like a piece of pie made with berries grown from the site for immediate consumption, or a sandwich with a tomato that's also being sold at the farm stand, or something along those lines. And so I think that was what Sam was trying to point out earlier. Right. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And then I just wanted to make a comment around, I saw a lot of in the comments from planners and others that are kind of on the ground trying to work through these things. I think that it's at the state level trying to promote agriculture as a whole, getting into percentages of ingredients and chasing them down from where they may come is a really, really difficult exercise. I think we already have some issues with enforcement and concerns around it. And so I would just caution around kind of really getting into any dissection of percentage of ingredients and ingredients that could be grown in Oregon as a part of a processed food item. I think that it takes away from the purpose, right? The purpose is to protect farmland and the farmers. So it
Thank
gets
you, Lindsay.
just expensive and
we've heard
costly.
that that's a existing concern, that it's hard for planners right now to figure that out and go through these sort of analyses on proposals. And our hope here would be to provide some language that clarifies, so they don't have to do these calculations that they're doing as part of permit review. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So yeah, suggestions on that, on how to help Hillary and staff do that would be useful. Thank you, Lindsay. Sam, Brandon, Emily, Maitrier, and then we will move on to the next one, the farm stand development standards.
Yeah, I was just tacking on to what Lindsay said. I mean, the issue with how we regulate farm stands and agritourism and prepared foods on site right now is really broken, because it's kind of rooted in what they're talking about, like micromanaging the types of ingredients that are being used. And that's just not realistic from an enforcement standpoint. Like, are the planners going to have to be looking at the donuts in a lab to figure out how much of an ingredient was put into the apple cider donut? Like that, it's just at a certain point we kind of lose touch with reality and common sense. And I agree with Lindsay in that these types of things are what the public loves. They're promoting agriculture. They're making the general public excited to go out on a farm. And I understand we don't want, I'm going to say, the McDonald's of the world coming in and putting a McDonald's out there and saying, oh, I did it through a farm stand permit. That's silly. Like, that's not what most people are doing. And I just don't think we should be regulating to like the lowest common denominator speculative concerns, and really be focusing on like, what do people actually want? What are people doing? Is it good for agriculture? And can our planners reasonably enforce that? And if they can't reasonably enforce that, then like don't make them. It doesn't
And
make
I think there was one other thing that I've heard along the way too, Samantha, is that and provides enough information that people can comply with the rules
100%.
without even having to go talk to the planner, right?
That's my biggest concern on a lot of this is I'm happy to work myself out of a job. I don't want the farmers to have to go spend thousands of dollars of legal fees to decide whether or not they can sell an apple cider donut. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Brandon, Emily, Maitrier, and then our next topic.
So I thought about what people are saying, and I have a suggestion. And just to bounce it off, I'm not sure it's perfect, but the idea that you can sell processed farm crops and livestock from things that are grown on the farm operation and the local ag area. But then maybe there's a way to open it up for prepared items in some way, for crops that are grown only on the farm operation. You got something kind of cool that you grow and you can showcase not only the raw product like the berry, but you can showcase the jam as well, and still consider that part of the farm stand without being part of the 25%. Just an idea. Not exactly sure how to make that work.
Okay. Hillary got that. I see Hillary's nodding there. She didn't say anything, but she got that. Good. All right. Thank you, Brandon. Great suggestion. Emily, Maitrier, and then back to Hillary for our next topic.
Yeah, I just want to say that we're unique in the fact that we can't eat what we grow. Our primary crops are grass seed and tulips, and I don't want any of my customers eating tulips, to be completely fair with you. So I agree with kind of what Brandon had to say in regards to the local agricultural area. I want to be able to sell local farmers' produce and local farmers' processed items, just in the fact that we are such a large farm, which is great, that we are a platform for people and exposure for small farms that may not be able to see that kind of attendance on their properties. So I just really want to encourage that, like, as a tulip farmer, I want to be able to buy things from my local agricultural area to sell on my property.
To sell to the people who are coming to your property to get your tulips and seeds. Yeah, okay. All right, great. This is really helpful, and I think good. Okay, good. Maitre, and then back to Hillary.
Yeah, so I was just looking for a little bit of clarification here. When you're talking about prepared foods, is it like foods that's prepared off-site that's available on-site for consumption, or will a live kitchen, like for the farm to table arrangement that you're talking about, will that be allowed, or is it kind of just pre-prepared foods using locally grown products? And also, a lot of what is being recognized here as processed foods, those can also be consumed on site as a prepared food, I guess. So then is it that if it's consumed on site, then it becomes a prepared food and subject to the incidental retail sale, 25%? Is that how we're looking at it?
That's a great question, Maitri. And again, yes, there are some very fine distinctions that are part of these rules. So a prepared food item is something that is offered for immediate consumption on site, that's packaged for immediate consumption on site, right? So again, with the pie example, if you have a pie in a box with a sticker closing the lid, like that's, packaged with the intention that it be taken off site and consumed elsewhere. If you are selling a slice of pie on a plate, then that becomes a prepared food item because it's obviously served with the intention that it be consumed immediately on site, right? So prepared food items fall into that retail incidental item category, right? And so right now, those could be prepackaged food prepared offsite. In the future, like under the retail incidental item proposal, they could also be prepared offsite and brought back on site. But under the retail incidental item language proposal, and again, I'm Kirsten, not proposal, but concept that's being discussion. So I need to be careful about my language there. That would need to have some sort of relationship with the products that are being sold at the farm stand, not necessarily with what's being produced at that farm, but have to have some sort of relationship with things that are being sold at that farm stand. So if it is, for example, just a hot dog and a bun, and you're not selling hot dogs or buns at your farm stand, that wouldn't be allowable. It would need to have some sort of relationship, with what you're actually selling at your farm stand. Does that help?
Thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
that helps. And thanks for the clarification. Just one last
Yeah.
question though. So I heard some comments earlier, and I just wanted to clarify that, products that are local and processed at other farms, those too can be sold at a farm stand, correct? As long as it's a local agricultural area?
That's correct. So the way that this language reads, processed farms and farm crops can be from anywhere in the local agricultural area. And so at that farm stand, without any income limitation. So example, I have a farm stand in Union County. I can sell wine from Yamhill County, no income limitation on that.
Thank you.
I just quickly want to flag on this topic and then move on. I would caution against any sort of regulation that says where prepared food items could be prepared and trying to differentiate there, simply because there's other local departments and other regulations that prevent farmers from being able to do the preparation on site, even though they very much want to. They can't. So they have to do it at like a home kitchen, the local Grange, somewhere else nearby, and bring it on site.
Thank
So
you, Sam.
would it be helpful then for them to put something like into guidance or something that really clearly takes people to that place? That place.
Thanks. I would follow up on that and just recognize again that a farm stand permit does not authorize the processing of farm products. Farm crop processing is permitted either as a farm product processing use, subject to 215-255, as a home occupation if you wanted an in-home commercial kitchen under 215-448, or you could, again, go off-site to a pre-permitted facility, commercial kitchen elsewhere, or, you know, hire somebody else to prepare those products for you, process those products for you.
I agree with Hillary 100% here. For me, in my mind, when I considered like what does the farm stand permit do, it's your point of sale. Like it's not really how the crops got there per se. It's what are you selling, what are you allowed to sell versus
Right.
not. And so I just wanted to caution that of like I don't think we should be overly linear of where the preparation or the processing happens.
Got it. Super. All right. Really good conversation, people. Thank you very, very much for that. Let's move on to the next one, Hillary.
Thank you. And I just time check, we have an hour, I think, left in this meeting. Is that right, Donna?
Yes.
And yeah, and so we've got this topic and the fiscal impact statement to cover, as well as next steps to hear from Kirsten on that. So all right. So the next topic are impacts on neighboring farms. So again, this is a topic identified by the legislative work group that met throughout February as something for us to discuss and consider. And we did talk about that at one of our June RAC meetings. And I'll provide a little bit of context for this. So again, earlier today, we talked about sub 1 uses of right versus sub 2 uses that require an impacts test. So farm stands are a sub 1 use, and there is an assumption that they are not going to have a negative impact on surrounding farm and forest operations, no negative impact on their neighbors, so long as the legislative standards, the rule standards are followed. So as part of issuing a permit for a farm stand, a county does not need to consider the potential of that farm stand operation to impact their neighbors. Since 1993, only 112 farm stands have been permitted in the state of Oregon. And yet there seems to have been a lot of conflict that has generated around farm stand operations. So what we heard in some of our earlier conversation with our Rulemaking Advisory Committee were that concerns come up related to some particularly more intensive farm stand operations related to noise, traffic, the street side parking, litter, trespass. And some of our members have suggested it may be beneficial to explicitly allow counties the flexibility to require conditions of approval to address those concerns, like requiring buffers or hours of operation. Other RAC members have suggested that applying an impacts analysis would be helpful in reducing conflicts at farm stands. That would require legislative action to create a sub 2 farm stand use. Other RAC members suggested that further limiting the intensity, scope, and scale of farm stands would reduce conflicts and eliminate the need for an impacts test. And other RAC members expressed support for clear and objective standards that address those identified issues, as opposed to requiring an impacts analysis. After considering like all of these different sort of proposals that we've heard from RAC members and members of the public, we landed on, proposing to discuss this, like looking at a set of development standards for farm stands that are based on 2015 model code. One of our planners had shared that their county had adopted these standards into their ordinance and felt that it worked well to minimize conflicts. And they're from a county that has about a quarter of the farm stand approvals in the state. And so we, might want to look and talk about looking at these clear and objective standards that would require things like adequate off-street parking, paving surfaces or otherwise covering surfaces with bark chips or gravel, making sure that vehicle maneuvering is being conducted on site and not within right-of-way or streets or highways, clarifying that farm stand structures and parking are not permitted in right-of-way, verifying, that all of that through a county public works department, requiring signage for ingress and egress points to avoid confusion about neighboring driveways, adopting some clear vision standards or applying the county's clear vision standards to farm stand reviews. And then making sure that outdoor lighting is directed, away from neighbors. And then making sure that signs are compliant with county sign ordinances, and then offering counties the opportunity to require protective buffers or setbacks to minimize potential conflicts with adjacent farm and forest operations. So those are some things that are already adopted into county codes in some jurisdictions. And again, the intention here is to address the most common conflicts upfront during the permitting process, rather than as standards, rather than requiring an impacts review or looking at limiting farm stand scope and scale or other things like that. So thoughts and comments on that. Particularly interested in hearing from counties who might have these in their ordinances as well.
Okay, you got other hands up first, and I see some counties coming in. I'm going to go with the folks who came first now, and now that county planners are coming up, so that's great. So Sam, Lindsay, Ryan, Maitre, Eric.
So I'm really confused by this rule and the comment that we would ever be able to require them to go through the farm impacts test. And I'm really confused about how counties are doing this now. So I'm hoping to get some clarification here, because maybe I don't understand the law. So my understanding was that farm stands are a sub 1 use allowed as of right, and Brent Marr made clear that counties cannot apply additional criteria beyond the statute to sub 1 uses or require them to do the farm impacts test, because that would render the conditional uses, the sub 2s in statutes, superfluous. And so, and I don't have the statute up in front of me, but are counties doing these type of standards because there's something in the statute that references that? Is this because of other provisions of code, like because of their roads department or public health and safety? Because just reading this looks like we're kind of like ignoring Brent Marr and saying that counties can apply additional criteria to a sub 1 use. And maybe, Jim, I see your hands up, it's because DLCD is putting it in rule, and so therefore we're getting around that, but so I'm just really confused.
So can I jump in here since my name was brought up? There was an attorney general's letter of opinion after the Brent Marr decision, and I've given a copy of that to DLCD. That attorney general's letter of opinion basically said Brent Marr precludes counties from adding standards that would lead to denial approval criteria, but that counties can still use siting criteria such as setbacks, such as parking requirements and the like. It's a site plan review criterion. It's mitigation. It's not yes or no, it's how. And that letter of opinion I have provided to DLCD staff. It was a letter from Celeste Doyle, Department of Justice, to Richard Benner, Director at the Department of Land Conservation and Development, shortly after the Brent Marr decision came out.
But Jim, I mean, if it's not denial, like what if you can't provide adequate off-street parking? Then wouldn't that result in the denial of you getting your permit?
Site plan, if you read the Brent Marr decision, site plan review conditions cannot be used to deny an application. They can only be used as a how it's done.
So it guides the planner in the conversation.
Yeah, I don't understand that. So
how to
I'm
do that.
interested with the planners, if they can maybe help explain that a little bit better.
Well, I'm going to guess that's exactly why Hillary suggested we start with the planners. So Lindsay and Ryan, do you mind if I pop over you and go to the planners and let them address what Hillary was asking them to address? I will come back to you. I got it. All right.
And I will just add that this is in our model code. That was a project that we did in 2012 and was reviewed by the Department of Justice before it was published. Thank you. All right.
Maitre and then Eric.
Sorry, are you expecting? I thought Lindsay was speaking first.
Lindsay and Ryan agreed to defer to the county
Oh.
honors since questions kept coming up about how are you really doing it, right? So
Oh,
Hillary.
okay.
Yeah.
So, several of these points that are included in that list are already, they're part of what we have as our Article 4, their development standards. So things like review of private streets for, adequate turnout, having the fire marshal look at it, or things like screening, buffering, lighting, review of environmental standards like noise, air quality. All of these are development standards that apply to all uses that are kind of permitted through land use review. So that kind of gives us some basis for including these as requirements that go along with approving a farm stand. We also have the a right-of-way permit process where we look at site distance and construction of the of the access approach to county standards to ensure safety and adequate visibility. So that's kind of how we implement some of these. But then I too have a comment that I wanted to, since I have the floor here, I'll just go ahead to those. So there's the the Roman numerals 5, 7, and 8, I think. So we had some concerns about what is meant here by adequacy of egress and ingress. If there could be some clarification on that, because we, as I mentioned, pretty much look at site distance and just whether it's constructed to county standards, the access approach. We're not really looking at things like whether it can accommodate traffic from, say, for a berry stand or to a farm store, the difference there, the number of people, we're not really looking at that at that point. So some clarity about what is meant by the adequacy would help. And also I had some concern about the corner vision and the tree heights, but then I also see that you have the option to or otherwise required by county ordinances. So I think that kind of gives us the room because we have the standards and those kind of, it also depends on a situation by situation where everywhere the 3 foot would not apply. If there's a grade change, maybe when the 3 feet becomes too much, or even an 8 foot tall tree isn't necessarily a hindrance in some cases. So since you have the reference to the county ordinances, that kind of takes care of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maitre. And if you have language that would help you defer to your public works review process, that would be helpful as well.
Good. Thank you for that. Eric.
So I would say the Hood River County has adopted the model code as it relates to this. So we have a lot of this language already embedded into the Hood River County zoning ordinance. And so some of this information is appreciated. Some of the wording, the new wording, I would say is kind of contradicts or is a little bit different language than what the county uses throughout the rest of the county. And so my suggestion would be that some of this language be made more optional than mandatory, giving the counties the opportunity to address these things, but not necessarily mandating it, because it gives us the opportunity to look at different approaches. For instance, in regards to, like, say, parking, there may be opportunities where it doesn't make sense for someone to provide an impervious surface for parking because they have overflow parking, and it makes sense to put it in grass, given that during certain times of the year it's appropriate, and that way it doesn't take land out of production for the future. To address Sam's point as far as adequate off-street parking, I would say that certainly could be a factor in prohibiting the use. If someone doesn't have the ability to accommodate people on their property and provide parking for it, where are they going to park? How are they going to access the site? So I think those are important elements to what a development review would entail.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I see Charles raised his hand, and I know that I still have Lindsay, Ryan, and then Sam and Mike. I just want to make sure that all the county planners that want to have a voice here on this, and for the rest of you to hear about what they are doing, because I think that's been part of the richness is really hearing from your experiences on the ground.
Mhm.
Well,
Not that the others aren't rich too. I just want to make sure that we get a chance to hear these things. So, yeah, go ahead, Charles.
well, I agree with the other planners. So I guess there's some consistency that is happening. When especially with Hood River, what the was county was saying about maybe not making these mandatory through the state level, but because we do have development standards that we have that may conflict with this, and that would be an additional issue. We do, if there's a floodplain overlay, there's wildfire safety standards. These standards get applied to these types of uh, development that takes place. So we do a development standards for setbacks and access and so forth. So we have that inherently in our code. So that's it.
Okay, great. Super. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you, county planners, that were willing to say something about all this. We really appreciate it. Lindsay, you are next, then Ryan, then Sam, then Mike.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, so I appreciate the planner's perspective and that they're kind of already looking at these things as part of permitting processes. I am wondering whether it's these kinds of model codes is just kind of standard practice for counties, and if it's also being, if like these kinds of standards that counties have and need, right, are applied to like UPIC operations or on-farm processing or any other uses where like the public is coming to farms, and it may create more traffic, just to understand how it's being applied across the board.
Which might be hard for a county planner to answer across the board, but you might be able to get some at least individual responses there.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested to know if like it sounded like all the counties that spoke up have some of their own development standards that they kind of consider that have to do with other pieces. So if that's already part of the process for all kind of sub 1 permits, and or is it part of the process when you have a UPIC operation which can does not require a permit? Like how does that work, I guess is. And maybe Hillary can answer that for me.
Nice, thanks.
Thank you. And I don't want to respond on behalf of counties, like how they are applying development standards. Most counties do have development standards in different sections of the ordinance, which may apply to different uses. A lot of counties have codes that are structured very differently. Again, I think you could ask some of our RAC members here to share a little bit about how their county applies things and how they apply to, do or do not apply development standards to things that don't require, permits. If there's no nexus that requires a use permit, then there's like no opportunity for discussion at the counter. But if somebody does come in for a discussion, it's different, provides a different sort of opportunity. And Matri is volunteering, I think, to answer your question, which is lovely of her.
Well, that's not really, much I can say. Hillary pretty much answered it. Like if it's exempt from land use review, people either don't come or we don't really regulate it. So we're not really applying the development review standards there. But yeah, I guess that's kind of the short of it.
Thank you.
Right.
I can jump in a little bit. We have something called a zoning information sheet, which is like if somebody came in and said, I want to have a UPIC, situation on my farm, and they wanted us to document it in some form, that discussion, we could document it that way. That's not a permit. So we wouldn't be applying development standards to a UPIC farm necessarily. Of course, we would advise them that, hey, if there's floodplain, you should, stay out of there, or give them the overlays and setbacks for a property in an information sheet form.
Great, thank you. Brandon, are you adding on there your experience on
yeah,
that?
I can try to answer part of it. I think in the farm zones, the The farm stands that need a permit, farm stands that don't need a permit, we don't regulate because they're a farm. They're, but the ones that need a permit, they're the closest thing we have to kind of like going shopping, where customers show up at different times and different numbers, you can't predict it. Most of the other uses are, you're working for a business, you're working, doing something industrial, you're doing small scale, or just part of the week on particular times. We're like this, the employer could regulate and make sure that employees are staged and staggered to ensure that there's not issues with roadways, things like that. Rural roadways can get overwhelmed pretty easy because they're just not designed for a ton of traffic. And so if you do have a lot of people show up at a time, or you can't predict when they're going to show up, it's really important for safety to be able to accommodate people on site and not have roadway impacts, because there can be really serious problems on rural roadways.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you for that. Now I'm going to go on to Samantha, Mike, and Matt, and then my alarm's going to go off, and it's going to be time for us to move on to the fiscal, to the impact statements, the fiscal and housing impact statements.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on my prior questions and comments, and thanks everyone for the clarification and Jim for that. It makes sense, I think, how I think planners are doing this. I will just say at the highest level, from a policy standpoint, I think that's concerning, because I don't think that was the legislature's intention of creating this as a sub 1 use. And then especially in light of ORS 215-253, which gives heightened protections for ag buildings and ag practices. I think that that's interesting and probably something the legislature should look at. But I really want to focus on the substance of this and just express really strong opposition to these being mandated, because I do think that many of these will be what prevents a farmer from being able to have a farm stand. And when we're hearing concerns about their prohibiting farm stands, this is really the section, including the enforcement section, that I think gives people's those concerns. Now, none of these rules just flat say a farm stand is prohibited, but if you can't meet these siting standards, and then you can't qualify for a variance, or the variance pathway is too cost prohibitive, then you can't have a permit. And I just want to give examples of costs. I have a client right now who I have to get a variance. It's like literally I'm trying to get 10 feet on a setback. And just going through that, the application fee alone is $3,500. The application fee alone. So yes, in theory, there's all these other options, but they're not easy. They're really cost prohibitive. And I think there are other ways that we can mitigate traffic, we can address these concerns that doesn't result in inequitable outcomes for people, that I don't think is the intention of this department. And I don't think it's the intention of what we're trying to do here with these rules. I think we can mitigate impacts without being overly restrictive or making it so that people really can't get these permits. And I just have concerns about this approach.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing that with everybody, Sam. Mike, Matt, Jim, impact statements, fiscal.
Yeah, thank you. I think these are all great. I think they're all needed. There's some missing ones in here. But I think these show that the intent really is to try not to have impacts on neighbors. And if we leave too many of these out, then it appears the intent is that we don't care about impacts to neighbors. And certainly some of the pictures I've shown demonstrate that this type of standards would be helpful. And a couple of things that I do, and to me, all of these relate to health and safety. So I think they would be allowed under any circumstances. They all really do relate to health and safety. The one thing I'm not sure about is impervious surfaces that would include heavy graveling or paving. In those cases, we're basically destroying farmland, and that's one of the huge concerns about continuing to do different kinds of development on farmland, which often farm stands are development on farmland. Covering up farmland is in some cases as much as 25% of a farm covered by the development relating to a farm stand. But a couple that are left out, it would be very helpful at times, and I don't know how you write this in the criteria, but when the farm stand is located close to a neighbor, fencing or certainly volunteering to help put up no trespassing signs, those would be great things. No shared driveways. Shared driveways to a farm stand are a huge problem. If you're sharing a driveway with somebody that has a farm stand that has 200 or 300 cars on a weekend, that can be a problem. If you're actually allowing people to ingress and egress in the middle of the street to the orchards and to the farm, seems like liability protection of some kind to the neighbors would be very helpful, because there is a chance that somebody's going to get run over. And maybe something could be added in the ingress and egress standards there that prohibit pedestrians accessing the U-pick, et cetera, down the middle of a road. Also noise, I don't think there's any noise standard here. What we have up here occasionally is promotional events at farm stands or in particular wedding venues. You can sing along to the music till 10 o'clock at night, three nights on a weekend, every weekend, and that's kind of difficult. And then buffers are very helpful if the farm stand can be buffered by a certain number of feet from the neighbor's house.
Okay. All right. Thanks for those ideas, Mike. Really appreciate that feedback. Matt and Jim and Ryan, I've put my alarm, just not, this isn't for you, Matt, it's for the people following you. Put my alarm that just rang a minute ago on snooze. So we're now in the 7-minute zone, 7 or 9 minute, whatever my snooze is. So I'm just telling Jim and Ryan that. So Matt, go ahead.
So I think these are good guidelines. And in Deschutes County, we had to check a lot of these boxes, I think, before a farm stand was approved. It's really hard to anticipate how your business is going to grow, over time. I know ours is our parking lot. We had to make it larger, but it's kind of self-regulating because I don't want cars on the road, and I do my best if there is congestion, it's a bad experience for the customers. So we try and maintain our traffic flow and anticipate ahead of time. If we're getting busier the next weekend, we know that we have to have additional parking. So it's, there's a lot of rules we could write, but it's going to be common sense. And for my business to succeed, I need to make it a good experience. So I'm going to do the best of that. And I think just loading this up on the front end, the whole objective is to help encourage farming and success in farming. And so not having the bar too high to get somebody started into a farm stand or some entity in enterprise.
Nice. Thanks, Matt. And Matt, I'm just curious. I am, as everybody knows, new to this topic. So do you guys have like some sort of best practices that you share with each other with regards to farm stands? Do you do that already? Is there an organization somehow that does that?
I'm self-taught. So
Okay.
we were kind of one
Perfect.
of the first in Deschutes County to do a farm stand. They didn't really know how to handle us. There was a lot of questions about wedding venues and kind of the same problems that we're having with impact to neighbors and all that. As a general rule, I mean, I try and keep my neighbors happy. We maintain traffic, dust, garbage, noise, all of that, because I don't want them turning me in. And I think if a little bit of prevention is worth its weight in gold. I help my neighbors in between seasons so that if something happens, they're not just instantly angry at me and turn me into code enforcement. And I have phone numbers for everybody, and we just talk. So it's a great system.
All right. I really appreciate that. Thank you for just that little addition of how it works out there. Jim, Ryan, and then the fiscal impact.
Yeah, I'll be real quick here. I just wanted to relate, in my previous life as a government person, I used to get calls from farmers all the time complaining about having to comply with things like road approach permits, health and safety and welfare things and the like. And one of the things I always reminded them is when they bring the public onto their property, everything changes. You are no longer in ag buildings exempt from all these types of things, whatever. You now have to comply with health, safety, and welfare issues. And I remember one farm stand operator complaining that the Department of Transportation, so this was a state permit, was telling him he could not access the highway where he wanted to do that. Health, safety, and welfare again, or whatever. My point is, even if there's no land use permit required, there may be another agency or another department that requires some type of review. Remember, we're just talking about land use restrictions here now. So ODOT requires a road approach permit. The county requires a road approach permit. There may be a sewer and water district that has a drainage easement through your property. Just, they've got to remember, when you bring the public onto your property, everything changes.
Yeah, great. Great point. Okay. Thank you, Jim, Ryan, and then we move to our next topic. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks. I was just gonna say, I concur with what I was picking up from most of the county planners, I think, or all the county planners perhaps, that, this might be better suited for county ordinance level. Maybe not elevating up to the state rules level. So that was all I concurring with that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that discussion topic so wonderfully. Let's now move to the fiscal. Are you ready, Hillary?
All right, great. So this is an opportunity for you all to provide feedback on the fiscal impact statement that was included at the end of your at the end of the materials for meeting materials and posted for meeting number 4. Sorry, I'm getting a little sleepy. So, and some of the key points here and how we're sort of projecting the impact going forward. One, these rules are prospective. We've eliminated any further discussion of enforcement, compliance, mediation, resources, etc. So the impact will only be to new farm stands seeking new permits from the county. Our data, so counties are actually statutorily required to provide us data on permits that they issue in exclusive farm use zones, and that's been a requirement since 1983, so we've been tracking that. There are some changes in statute in 1993, and so a lot of the data that I actually use for uses starts at that date. Since 1993, we've had 112 farm stands approved in the state of Oregon. That's an average of 4 farm stands a year. And so in terms of impact, we're projecting that roughly 4 new farm stand permits a year would be impacted by these rules. Across the state, you see in this bottom graph here that a quarter of the farm stand permits issued in the state are actually issued in Marion County. Hood River, Yamhill, Benton, and Jackson are the other counties where we see more farm stand permits being issued. There's a number of counties in the states where there have been no farm stand requests. And I think it's reasonable to assume, for purposes of our fiscal impact statement, that those trends may continue going forward into the future. So if there's anything else that folks saw in the fiscal impact statement or in the housing impact statement, we'd love your feedback on how we've addressed that.
Okay. Comments from folks. Sam, Mike, I love that the two of you have so much energy for this. It's great that you're there.
Rock solid.
Rock solid. Others want to encourage you to get energized too. So come on in if you want to. Sam, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have any comments on the actual substance of this. I have a process question, which I assume we're going to get to. And I know we talked about it a little. I've never been in a RAC process where we reviewed fiscal impact. Normally we review that at the end of the process. And I know that originally we probably were at the end of that process, but now we're not, which is great. And we're going to take a pause, which I also fully support. I am wondering though, if after we pause and the department does pick up rulemaking again, will we have the opportunity to review an updated fiscal impact statement and kind of go through this process again?
Okay, and I see the deputy's got her hand up, so I'll let Kirsten answer that question.
Thank you, Samantha. It's a fair question. Given, limited staff resources, everyone's resources takes time. There's an opportunity cost on everybody's time just to even be in this meeting today. Folks providing feedback today is helpful. And then if we were to publish draft rules in the Secretary of State Bulletin, that fiscal impact statement would be in there again, if as amended by staff or per guidance today. And then that is also subject to the public comment period. So the RAC wouldn't necessarily need to meet again, but we would certainly welcome folks' comment in the comment period if we got the fiscal impact statement wrong. And then that would be carried forth to commission. Staff would represent that in our summary, staff report summary, as we address the commission if the rules move forward.
But I presume, Kirsten, that the fiscal impact statement will be updated based upon whatever actual, okay, thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Yep.
And we've already heard Hillary say that it will be updated, certainly to talk about the enforcement piece the pieces that are not there now.
Oh, yeah.
The enforcement piece would be removed. So that paragraph would be removed from the fiscal impact statement, and the rest of the information that's in there already would remain. Yeah.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you for the question, then the clarification. Mike?
Fortunately for you, I almost couldn't get unmuted, but
there you go.
Of course, it depends on how the rules come down in the end, what the impacts will be. But I think there's probably significant physical and housing impacts in areas where there's going to be significant farm stands. And the question, though, that's difficult is, how do you separate out the farm stand fiscal and housing impacts from agritourism fiscal and housing impacts? And we know that's hard enough to sort out just in the conversations we're having. But every time you add some kind of use or public, any kind of public in a rural jurisdiction, you have costs. And you have, particularly in our area, we see a lot of costs from tourism. Certainly some of those are associated with agritourism and farm stands. You have more need for police, fire, ambulance, public works, planning departments, and ODOT. In all those cases, there are incremental costs. Every time you add one human being to a county, there are incremental costs. So those need to be considered. The other thing, though, that we see is that as you add these uses, you have to have employees for some of these farm stands and agritourism uses. That puts an additional load on the short labor supply in the area. So there's a potential labor supply issue where there's more competition for labor. The price of labor goes up, and certainly it impacts the farmers in the area where there's less labor available, and the price of labor may go up. So that's something we see here when some of the kids of my workers are employed by agritourism events, and they'd much rather work in a restaurant where they can get a tip than work on a farm where they're picking. So there's a fiscal impact there. And also in terms of housing, there's more competition for housing where you have significant agritourism and significant need for employees. So all these are factors that ought to be put into a fairly complex study. The other issue is we're seeing an increase in farm price land, the price of farmland, which I mentioned in an earlier meeting. That's certainly a fiscal impact that should be considered. Every time we add uses through the DLCD list of uses on farmland, price of farmland goes up. And we need to really study that carefully. It's reducing the ability of young farmers to farm in the future and produce food. So that's very significant, particularly here in our county.
Great. Okay. Super. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Brandon and then Emily.
Hello, there's something prominent on that graph that I wanted to mention. So the graph shows Marion County has approved more than twice the number of the next highest county in the state. So the little background to that is not all the farm stands we were approved are still operating. Some found it very hard to succeed. And that's one of the reasons I'd like to make sure the rules include what it takes to succeed. We've got such a variety of crops in Marion County. I would love to have us have 27 functioning great farm stands. We have some that came in before the permitting process to showcase all the crops and encourage people to come out and support farming and know what we do in the farm area. Just wanted to point out that we do not have, a lot of these have not succeeded. So there's a lot of background to that.
Thank you, Brandon. And that is important. I will clarify again that these are permits that have been issued for farm stands since 1990, 1995. Yeah, 1993, actually.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. Emily, you're up.
Yeah, I just want to counter a little bit to that. I think that on the negative impact of agritourism, I think that agritourism brings exponential amounts of positive impact to communities when it's done correctly. Our community, the city of Woodburn, the county, Clackamas County, everyone around us supports what we do, and the amount of people we bring into our community. Again, we bring in 150,000 people in a month of April. We have no traffic. Our neighbors love us. Our neighbors support us. And we do this in a way that's very effective for our area, and we push people to other businesses. I think that the fiscal impact and the economic impact of our farm alone, plus the 27 and 4 in Clackamas County, 27 in Marion County, I think we bring amazing positive impact to our community. And Oregon State came out with an amazing study, last year or the year before, on economic impact, and that actually didn't even include what our farm does. So some of your larger farms weren't included in that. But again, I just want to counter, we bring employment to high schoolers. I don't think we're pulling labor away from any farms at least in our area. And I just want to say that everyone's supportive of us in our area.
All right, and so looking at both the positive and the negative side parts of the impacts in that fiscal statement. Great, thank you for that and for that study, Emily. Samantha, I see your hand. Don't worry.
I'm not here to weigh in on either side of that. I would just like to remind the public that the fiscal impact and housing statements are required under the Administrative Procedures Act, and there are very specific outline of what they are supposed to quantify and not quantify. So most of what was suggested is not appropriate for the fiscal impact statement and is not what this is for.
Okay, I think it's really great to clarify that this is required. This isn't something that DLCD is just doing because they have to. They're doing the required response that they need to do. Hillary, do you want to say more about that? You're muted.
So yeah, Sam is right. There is very specific information that we include in the fiscal impact statement. And, if you read through that section of the statement, you'll see that, we are doing our best on available data to sort of project the impact that the rule changes would have very specifically on certain types of businesses. In this case, farm businesses, and potentially other businesses. And so so that's why we're looking at this historical data specific to farm stands, and are looking to project trends out into the future, sort of based on the historical data that we have.
Great. Okay. Good.
Right.
Thank you, Hillary. All right. Any other comments on that before we move to our last item, which is next steps? Okay, good. Thank you all for those comments and for letting the agency have that conversation. Kirsten, I just saw you turn your camera on because you're going to do next steps.
Yeah, I hope to. And you guys, we may actually get out a little bit early. Any objection? Everyone's ready to fall. Everyone's ready to fall over. This has been incredibly invaluable, no question. So thank you. I know Commissioner Boyer may want to come on if she's able and give a few words, but I hope everyone's learning. I know we are. We do need to huddle up. We'll huddle up with the governor's office and the Oregon Department of Agriculture in a few weeks. And one thing I can, and to determine the future timeline, we'll absolutely let Rules Advisory Committee members know the minute we know. You have the most efficient and responsive staff person on this, and Hillary Foote. So the minute we know, I can guarantee it. Things that we know for sure, and so I'd like to just make sure this is really clear for anyone who's listening now or later, is that there won't be a hearing in September at the commission. So there's we know that we want to pause. We won't be publishing September 1st in the Secretary of State's notice. So that was what was planned. So those are really important milestones if we were to have a hearing in September and look to adopt in December. We had talked about avoiding the fall harvest season we extended the public comment period. All those are subject to change. So once we figure out a next revised schedule, we'll be sure to get that out. But this conversation won't be lost. This guidance you all have provided is just, as I say, invaluable. Donna, thank you. I'm not sure if there's anything else or if Commissioner Boyer is still with us and wants to come on and commend the work so far. Yeah, here she is. I see her.
Want to
Yeah.
say something, Commissioner Boyer?
I really am appreciative of the pause. There's been a lot of information at this RAC meeting, probably more than any other RAC meetings I've sat in on or any RACs that I've sat on. So I appreciate the pause. It's going to give me time to reflect on all the information I've received. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here today and giving us your insight. It's needed.
Yeah. Yeah, super. Thank you. Okay. I think that's it, unless the governor's office wants to say anything. She's not turning her camera on yet. I don't know if I'm going to take that as
Hi, I'm still here. I promise. No, just thank you everybody for the engagement today. I think to take us back to where we were at 1 p.m., it's clear that this is a group of folks who all want the same outcome, which is just a better outcome for Oregonians. And so just really appreciate the engagement and what I thought was a really healthy discussion today. So thank you, and we'll be back in touch.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So look for more from Hillary in the future, but not too soon, because we need to have some huddling up and figuring out what the next path forward is, and have an opportunity to really look at all of the comments listen to the comments that you've made here in the RAC meetings and that you have sent in, and others as well. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any questions about process at this point? Kirsten, I see your hand up.
Sorry, I forgot that Hillary always has some homework for us. So Hillary, do you want to get in and say a little immediate next step as we're beginning to take our little pause?
Yeah, just apologies. We did not get meeting summary out from our July 18th meeting. There will be a single meeting summary for part 1 and part 2 of meeting number 4. So that will come as a single meeting summary at some point next week. We're going to ask for comments back, revisions to that meeting summary by August 8th, and any additional comments that you might have on that fiscal or housing impact statement. You can submit that by August 8th. And as Kirsten said, we will provide any updates on schedule as soon as we have them for you guys. Great. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. Hey, it's been wonderful working with you all. I look forward to working with you sometime in the future, perhaps. We'll see what that schedule looks like, and really, really appreciate you all being here and participating. I know this has been a really tough one for everyone, and I appreciate you hanging in there and appreciate you just being really real about what your experiences have been on the ground and what matters to you. So thank you so much.